This is The Road Show, and I'm your host, David Warren. On today's program, we welcome back Jim Stovall, who's here to discuss legendary voices of history, people whose words shaped how we think, what we do, and who we are. These quotes are found in Jim's newest book, Words That Shaped Our World. Let's welcome back to the program our friend, Jim Stovall.
David, it is always great to be with you. Because of the books and movies and all the things we do, I do literally hundreds of radio shows across the country, and most of them are an ordeal to endure, and I always look forward to our conversations. I have for years and always enjoy, and your audience is fabulous. We always hear from a number of your amazing listeners, so it's always great to be back with you.
Well, I hope not to disappoint you or the listeners today, Jim, as host. Okay, this book, Words That Shaped Our World. What a clever idea for a book. Tell us when this occurred to you, this idea.
I was having lunch last summer with Mark Victor Hansen, who wrote all of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Mm-hmm. And I was joking with him about the way he gets other people to write his books, and then they go out and buy them. And, because his books are amazing. He's the best-selling author alive on the planet today with several $1 billion worth of those books out there. And I just, I don't know, that got me to start thinking, and I thought, there's been some amazing things written if you could put them all together in one place. And I thought, are there enough quotes I like to put in one book? Well, I got those together, and then the initial response to the book has been so good. We are about halfway through writing volume 2 right now, and as often happens in life, you start looking into something and with an idea of scarcity, there's not going to be enough. And you realize, wow, there's more than I ever imagined. I think I could write 10 books of this. So just amazing things. And, some of them people will like, some of them they will love, some of them, the most it will do is cause you to think. Uh-huh. And, wow, if you read a book that you like, you love, and makes you think, you had a good day.
And some of the people might even make you bristle a little bit, Jim.
Oh, absolutely. But anytime I read something, and as you know, I, as a blind person myself, when I could read with my eyes, like you and most of your listeners do, I don't know that I ever read a whole book. And then after losing my sight, I was part of an experiment on compressed digital audio they did out of Washington through the Department of Education to see how fast people could listen to audiobooks. And after the experiment was over, I kept going. And the bottom line is I read a book every day. There hasn't been a day in 30 years I haven't read a whole book. So, I always, find things, and some of them are great. Some of them cause me to bristle. I mean, I've had a wonderful experience reading books by people I disagree with. I mean, I've read Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. I've read Karl Marx's Treatise on Socialism. I read these books, and, I think sometimes we learn more by reading things we don't agree with, because it causes us to solidify, well, then what do I believe? Sometimes I think that's better than, a lot of people, they just get themselves in the choir and are preached to by somebody they already are sold on. And that's great to reinforce what you think, but, wow, if you really want to get some clarity, read something you don't agree with.
Well, the name of the book, again, we'll discuss today, is Words That Shaped Our World, and here's how the book works. Each chapter contains a legendary quotation by a person, a famous person. It also contains an anecdote regarding the voice of the quote and the circumstances surrounding that person. And finally, Jim Stovall style, it contains inspiration and motivation for the reader to create an impactful, purposeful life. So, at least in volume 1 here, and congratulations on moving ahead towards a second book, but how did you decide whose voices would be included in Words That Shaped Our World?
Well, in many cases, I have a co-author in this book, Kathy Johnson, and we met. She worked on one of the magazines that carries my weekly column. and we met years ago and have always talked about doing something together. And she is a researcher. She loves to research things. I enjoy researching about as much as I enjoy my daily exercise and doing my sit-ups. I mean, that's about the level I'm at on that. And she loves it, and she's exceedingly good at it. So, when all of a sudden this idea came to me, I thought, if you're interested in doing all that research and putting together kind of put us in the time and place and what was going on in the world and all that stuff, and then I can write the perspective, the so what. One of the quotes in the book is from one of my favorite American authors, Louis L'Amour, who said, "No one can be judged except against the backdrop of the time and place in which they lived." So the fact that Winston Churchill may have said something, or Socrates may have said something, you really can't fully understand that until you know who they are and what was going on in the world when they said it. I mean, when you hear Franklin Roosevelt say, "We have nothing to fear except fear itself," you've got to know that he was leading a country that had just gone through a horrific decade of depression and was locked into a world war that at that time was far from certain we were going to come out ahead on that deal. Mm-hmm. So it matters who said it, when did they say it, why did they say it, and then my part of it is, what does this mean to us? I mean, the fact that somebody said some pithy, cute little quote several hundred years ago is one thing, but unless it matters to you and me as we live and move and have our being here in the 21st century, it really doesn't matter.
Right. Well, in this book, Jim, there are quotations from, you just mentioned, presidents and politicians, novelists, poets, playwrights, scientists, philosophers, psychologists, personal development experts, finance and business leaders, humanitarians and civil rights icons, athletes, coaches, artists, actors, and musicians. And since you are a personal development expert, at least in my opinion, let's start with some titans of personal development that are included in your new book. And we will begin with perhaps the most influential voice in your life, Napoleon Hill. And here is his quote: "Every adversity, every failure, every heartbreak carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit." Jim, tell us, who was Napoleon Hill?
Napoleon Hill was born in the 1880s. He grew up in extreme poverty. I've been to the home where he was born and raised in the coal country there in Virginia. And then at the turn of the century, when the 20th century began, he was a newspaper reporter. And he was actually there when the Wright brothers flew the first time. And then after that, they sent him out on an assignment to interview Andrew Carnegie, who was the richest man in the world at that time, the founder of U.S. Steel. And as you and I probably would if we were interviewing the richest guy in the world, and young Napoleon Hill said, "How do you get to be rich?" Mm-hmm. And Carnegie said, "Well, no one's ever quantified the science of success. But if you will dedicate the next 20 years of your life to doing it, you will be the one that reveals that." And Hill took that challenge. So Carnegie introduced him to Henry Ford and Thomas Edison and Helen Keller and J.C. Penney and, 500 of the most successful people of that era. And over the next 20 years, Hill interviewed them, not about their theories of life or what they think some concept should be, but what did you actually do to become successful? And he synthesized all that into a book that was released in 1938 called Think and Grow Rich. It remains the best-selling book ever in the field of personal development. And in there, he has 17 principles. And, I remember reading it the first time because my mentor, when I was in college, made me read that book 3 times before he would even start talking to me. And I remember getting to that quote: "Every adversity, every setback, every heartbreak is endowed with the seed of a greater good or an equal benefit." And, as a blind person, what I'm hearing is there's something good in this equal to the bad. And David, often when we hear a profound saying, you get two immediate impressions. One is that cannot be true. And the other impression you get is that has to be true. In 2000, I was honored to receive the accolade of the International Humanitarian of the Year for some work we've done for blind people around the world. And I received the award right after Mother Teresa. So she was there, and she said something to me it did that to me. She said, Jim, unless we love everyone unconditionally, we really don't love anyone at all. Because if you love conditionally, all you're saying is, I love people that are lovable to me. But unless we love everyone unconditionally, we don't love anyone at all. And man, I thought that cannot be true. And then I thought about it, and I thought that has to be true. And the same thing with Hill's quote. Reading that those 35 years ago for the first time, I can tell you it's become an important part of my life. And, I have learned so many things, and so many doors have opened for me as a result of my blindness. Not directly because of it, but as a result. As the scripture tells us, all things work together for good. It did not say all things are good. It said all things work together for good. Mm-hmm. And, I wish I could have learned everything I learned and done everything I done without losing my sight. But I don't know how I could have ever gotten the vision I got on life and success until I went blind. And that's what really changed me. So that's where we got the Napoleon Hill quote, and very, very impactful in my life.
Jim, looking at the list of people who are included in your new book, Words That Shaped Our World, I had the pleasure of interviewing just one of these people on a couple of occasions, Mr. Zig Ziglar. And here is his quote: "Man is designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness." Tell us what it was like to share the stage with Zig Ziglar.
Well, I will tell you a brief story that tells you everything you need to know about Zig. I met so many people in that field, or the field of success, or just top executives, entrepreneurs, people. And as you know from being an interview, David, many people you meet, you had admired from afar, but some of them, the closer you get, the less appealing they become. Mm-hmm. Zig was not one of those people. The better I got to know Zig and the more we worked together, the more I loved him. It's like peeling another layer off the onion, and it just got better. But when I first started out, I was a kid, and they did these huge positive thinking rallies. And they had people like Zig Ziglar, Robert Schuller, Norman Vincent Peale, and all these guys, amazing towers of, personal development. And I'm the new guy, and I'm sitting over on the bench backstage. And, if somebody dies or, something catastrophe happens, or if they run short, and I tell you, when you get a group of speakers, nobody ever goes short, okay? There's never any time left over. Right. But so I'm sitting back there day after day after day. And Zig would always greet me and everything. He said, "Mr. Stovall, how are we holding up today?" I said, "Zig, I don't know if I'm ever going to get on." He said, "Son, just keep your attitude right. You never know what might happen." And then about that time, the promoter came in, the guy that organized the whole thing, and I saw Zig turn to him and says, "I got a little bit of a problem. I got a bad throat today. Could I do about 25 minutes and then bring out young Mr. Stovall and let him have the rest of my time?" Mm. And the guy said, "Sure." Well, Zig did that, and just to be introduced by Zig Ziglar. And it was my first time, and an overwhelming response. And it was the beginning of a lot of great things in my career. And as my assistant and I, Kelly, who you know and love, like I do, she and I were going through the tunnel from the arena over to the hotel across the highway. Way down at the other end, I heard Zig yelling at me, "Stovall, you hit it out of the park today." I said, "Yeah, and your bad throat cleared up, Zig."
That's great. Jim, you write about Zig in your book. You said, "I remember sitting backstage at an arena event waiting for my turn to speak. Yeah. It was one of those days everything seemed to be going wrong. The sound wasn't working right. They couldn't get the lighting adjusted, and the stage manager was panicking. Zig came in the back door of the arena with his standard greeting to everyone, "It's a great day today." The frazzled stage manager responded in a snide and sarcastic tone, "Well, you're in a good mood today, aren't you?" The backstage area fell silent, and everyone was awaiting Zig's response. He smiled, turned to the stage manager, and said, "Yes, I'm having a great day today because over 20 years ago, I decided to have a great day today." The stage manager challenged, "I think that motivational speeches are temporary and all of the positive thoughts wear off." Zig chuckled and responded, "I agree that results of motivation are temporary, just like the results of bathing, which is why we recommend both on a daily basis."
Yeah, you don't get any better than that. And, guys like me are able to do what we do because guys like that did what they did. I mean, we do stand on the shoulders of giants.
We're talking about legendary voices of history right now, those of personal development. I'm going to skip Dale Carnegie and bring him in for the wrap-up at the end of today's program. But I want to mention a guy that you included named William H. Johnson. And not many people will recognize that name, but they will sure know his quote. And it is, "If it is to be, it is up to me." And something that's unique about this quotation is that all 10 of its words are only 2 letters. Listen again. If it is to be, it is up to me. Jim, you say these are small words with a huge impact. The beginning of all success and achievement is taking personal responsibility.
David, we live in a world where a lot of people don't know what happened. Most people aren't sure anything did happen. But whatever it is, we want to blame everybody else. Mm-hmm. And, we need look no further than our leaders in Washington. And, the only clarity they bring us is the fault is across the aisle over there. And, and so many people in our life, we have excuses for everything. And we live in the instant participation trophy age. But unless or until you and I are willing to accept the fact that we are where we are today because of all the choices we've made in the past, or to put that another way, all the choices we have made in our entire life, all put together, have brought us to this place at this time, right now. Mm-hmm. And until we're willing to own that, we can't live this day and every day of the rest of our lives in the certain knowledge that tomorrow will be anything we want it to be based on today. But you can't sit here and say, I have free will and total control, and I can make my dreams come true, and everything can happen for you. You can't say you live in that world if you say, but all these things that have happened to me in the past aren't my fault, and I'm a victim. It doesn't work both ways.
Right. Jim Stovall is our special guest today. We're talking about his new book, Words That Shaped Our World. When we come back, we will discuss legendary voices from Jim's and my, David Warren's, home state of Oklahoma. Back after this. I'm David Warren, here with some exciting news for Oasis listeners. We have a new mobile device app. It's free, easy to download, and lets you enjoy our refreshing music and talk everywhere you go. If you have an Android cell phone, go to the Google Play Store. And if you have an iPhone or iPad, visit the Apple Store and search for Oasis Radio Network. Be an Oasis ambassador and share this news with family and friends around the world.
I came to this place from a dry, thirsty land. I found an oasis of love. Oasis Network.
On today's program, Jim Stovall, our very special guest, back with us, and I am so enjoying my time, as I always do, with Jim, and we're discussing his newest book, Words That Shaped Our World. This is about legendary voices of history whose words, again, shaped our world. So, for this section, Jim, since both you and I are Okies, let's discuss some legendary voices from our home state of Oklahoma, and we will start with Will Rogers. And his quote is this: "Live in such a way that you would not be ashamed to sell your parrot to the town gossip." I'm going to read a little bit now from your book, Jim. You write, I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I make my home today. Arguably, the most famous Oklahoman of all time was Will Rogers. There is no one alive today who is as popular or widely admired as Will Rogers was during his lifetime. He was an author, broadcaster, movie star, columnist, and the most respected voice of reason regarding political matters and issues of the day. Jim, you say I've written a number of novels in my Homecoming historical series. Each of these stories takes place at a modern-day high school, and the namesake of the school gets involved with the students in fun and unique ways. Among my favorite of these novels is Will to Win, which features Will Rogers and dozens of his poignant and timeless quotes. Will Rogers' words remind us that we can never overshadow our own reputations. We did exhaustive research in writing the Will to Win novel and in working with the scholars at the Will Rogers Memorial Museum, as well as other sources around the world. We could not find one hint of scandal or controversy surrounding Will Rogers. This is unique and refreshing in the world of celebrities, world leaders, and icons. Well, the next Oklahoman of import that we will now discuss is Mickey Mantle. Here's his quote: "If I knew I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself." Jim, who was Mickey Mantle?
Mickey Mantle was probably the best baseball player of his time. There had been this big thing, since in modern history, the premier team was the New York Yankees, and in an era where there was only one game a week on television, somehow it seemed like it was always the Yankees and whoever they were playing. Well, they'd started out center field for the New York Yankees was Babe Ruth for all those years, and then Joe DiMaggio came in, and he was it for, and everybody's thinking, who can ever replace Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio? And here comes Mickey Mantle, and he was amazing, and I grew up here in Oklahoma. My father was a minor league baseball player back in the day, and his claim to fame was he got in a game in the minor leagues. My dad played for Springfield, Missouri, and Mickey, as a 17-year-old, signed a pro contract and played for a team in Joplin, Missouri. And my dad got in a game and played against Mickey Mantle. And once he saw Mickey hit 3 in a row completely out of the stadium, I mean, not just a little over the fence, I mean, over the parking lot, over the street. I mean, it was just incredible. My dad went and told the manager, look, I'm going to need to go get a job and do something else. He said, I thought I was a pro baseball player, but that's a pro baseball player. And what was neat was years later, my first book came out, and I'd heard about Mickey Mantle my whole life from my dad. Well, my first book's coming out, and I'm on Good Morning America, and I'm sitting there in the green room getting ready to go on, and who is the next guest after me? He walks in, is Mickey Mantle. So I'm telling him this story about my dad and everything else, and he said, is your dad still living? I said, oh, yeah, he's still living, alive and well. He said, can you get him on the phone? I said, sure, I can. So I called my dad, and I said, Dad, got somebody here wants to talk to you. He said, well, your mother and I are waiting. Aren't you going to be on Good Morning America? I said, yeah, in a minute. Give me a minute, Dad. But first, there's somebody wants to talk to you. And, and it was so cool to, Dad got to talk to Mickey Mantle. And he, Mickey had a troubled life. He really did, had a lot of problems. But, I admire people that do what they do the best. There was nobody better at what he did than Mickey Mantle. And, that's all we can strive to do, is be the best we can at whatever it is we're supposed to be out there doing.
I hadn't thought about this until I read your book, Jim, but my second grade teacher, Mrs. Little, I remember probably the first day of class, she said, by the way, kids, my cousin is Mickey Mantle. Just a little factoid from my past there. All right, we're going to wrap up with one more legendary voice from Oklahoma during this segment with Jim Stovall that's contained in his book, Words That Shaped Our World. And here are Paul Harvey's words. He said, in times like these, it helps to recall that there have always been times like these. And speaking of memories, I remember riding down the road as a little boy with my parents, AM radio only. If there was FM, I don't remember us playing it, and hearing Paul Harvey with the rest of the story. What comes to mind when you think of Paul Harvey, Jim?
Well, like you, I grew up and, my parents and grandparents and, Paul Harvey was on in the morning with the news. He was on at noon with news and commentary. And then in the afternoon, you would get the rest of the story. And, I think of Paul Harvey. I think one of my best memories of him is one day, a young lady down the hall that answers our phones comes running into my office and said, Paul Harvey's on the phone. He wants you to autograph some books for him. And I said, the Paul Harvey? She said, no one else talks like that. Of course, it's the Paul Harvey. So I got on the phone, and that was the beginning of a friendship that he endorsed several of my books. He was amazing. And, last year I got inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. And, when I went to learn a little bit about it, I learned that Paul Harvey and Mickey Mantle and Will Rogers are all in there. And I thought, wow, this is a cool place to be. And they have a museum in Oklahoma City. And I'm just glad to have one little corner with people like that. Paul Harvey was a dear friend. And like I said, Mickey Mantle was an inspiration to our family. And Will Rogers, my Will to Win book is getting turned into a movie right now, which we'll shoot here in Tulsa. And, I'm excited about introducing a whole new century of people to Will Rogers. I mean, never been anybody like that. So, yeah, I think, it's fun to grow up here in Oklahoma and realize, wow, these people, they came out of here just like you and me, David.
Mm-hmm. You write about Paul Harvey here in your book. You say in his quote, "In times like these, it helps to recall that there have always been times like these." Paul Harvey echoes the sentiment that there's nothing new under the sun. History can teach us many lessons, and it's comforting to remember that whatever we may be facing, our ancestors likely faced something similar in the past. Before we take our break, Jim, where can people get this new book, Words That Shaped Our World, by you, Jim Stovall, and Kathy Johnson?
You can get it on Amazon, at any bookstore, anywhere books are sold. Just tell them you want Words That Shaped Our World.
All right, I'm David Warren. Jim Stovall is our very special guest, and when we come back, we will discuss legendary female voices. Back after this.
I'm Karen Jensen Salisbury, one of the hosts you hear on the Oasis Network Roadshow. For 35 years, this 1 hour of the day has inspired and motivated you, our listeners, with thousands of stories of people whose lives demonstrate the truth that with God, all things are possible. It's an hour that you should make a part of your day, Monday through Friday, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Central. The Roadshow, an Oasis Network presentation.
Jim Stovall is back with us today, and we're talking about his newest book, Words That Shaped Our World. And Jim mentioned before the break that you can pick this book up wherever books are sold, and that would include online retailers such as Amazon.com. You will find it under the author's name, Jim Stovall, and as you mentioned earlier, Kathy Johnson, and she's kind of the Jack Canfield to your Mark Victor Hansen in a way for this book.
I will tell her you said so. She will like that very much.
I remember interviewing Mark Victor Hansen, and he even brought you up. And he said, have you ever heard of Jim Stovall? And I was thinking, actually, I probably said, have I ever heard of Jim Stovall? He's one of my favorite people. But he had talked about maybe you guys making a movie. Is that still in the works?
Yeah, we are discussing that. And I made a movie called Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, about the life of Napoleon Hill. And it's kind of a docudrama. It goes back through Edison and Henry Ford, and we kind of have little vignettes and dramas, and then a lot of thought leaders that we pulled together on that. So he had some input on that, and I got more than my share of screen time, but it was a fun project. And yeah, Mark and I are talking about several projects, and he's an amazing guy, but as you know from talking to him, he's got 10 things going on at once. And so getting Mark I would have to tie him down for 3 or 4 months to do a movie, because he is he is in hyperspeed all the time. And I love him. He's a great, great friend.
I was going to say, I've interviewed Mark Victor Hansen a couple of times, and it sounds like he's had about 5 cups of coffee before you speak with him. But that's who he is, and he's a great guy. And boy, has he sold a lot of books. He and Jack Canfield have sold the most books in history.
Yep.
So he's doing something right. Okay, let's switch to female voices. Legendary voices of history is what we're talking about today. So let's talk about, first of all, a lady that you mentioned earlier briefly, Helen Keller. And I think this quote might speak to me more than any other quote from the book, maybe just because of where I am in my life right now, Jim. But she is quoted as having said, "When one door of happiness closes, another opens. But often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one that has been opened for us." What does that mean for you personally, Jim?
Well, first off, as a blind person myself, I think it's amazing that she talks about we fail to see something. And, once again, it's that difference between sight and vision. And I do believe, happiness is a decision. Happiness is an opportunity we all have. And, oftentimes we get it in our mind the way we want things to be, and anything that's not that, we decide we're going to be unhappy with. And a lot of times, I've had goals and dreams and ambitions, and the reality that came about is so much better than my wildest dreams were. And I remember that song Garth Brooks did about going back to his high school reunion and meeting his old girlfriend, and his line is, "I thank God for unanswered prayers." I mean, sometimes we don't get what we want, but we always get what we need. And I may be the first guy to quote Mick Jagger on your show, but two things: we don't get what we want. We all know that. But if we try, we find we get what we need. And so you got to try and you got to go find it. But, we were created in such a way that, the plans and the designs for us are so much greater than we have. When I was a little kid, 3 years old, I wanted to ride my tricycle in the street. And my dad said, "No, you got to drive here in the driveway. That's it." And I thought, the driveway's slanted, it's small, it's no good. The street, this big, wonderful, flat area out there. And I didn't get what I wanted, but I got what I needed because I didn't get squashed by a car. And I grew up to understand, wow, it's better I didn't get what I wanted then. And that is true so many times. There's a plan. So, that's where the walk of faith comes in. And we just have to take one step at a time. And as Helen Keller said, look for that open door, and happiness resides there.
Jim, you write in your book about Helen Keller, "As a blind person myself, I have always thought of Helen as a pioneer and monumental figure. A number of years ago, I met and befriended her great-grandniece, Keller Johnson, who continues to carry the torch and the legacy of her famous ancestor. As a person without sight, I am acutely aware of my dependence on my hearing to navigate the world. In communicating with deaf people, I have learned that they lean on their sight to access information and connect with other people. Helen Keller was born both deaf and blind, which multiplies and compounds the challenges faced. Her story was immortalized in the award-winning movie, The Miracle Worker." In her quote, "When one door of happiness closes, another opens, but often we look so long at the closed door that we do not see the one that has been opened for us," Helen Keller reminds us that no single incident or circumstance is either good or bad. We have the right to choose to turn any problem, challenge, or setback into a springboard to something great in the future. In this way, failure becomes fertilizer for our future bountiful harvest. That is so well written, Jim. All right.
Thank you.
The next lady we will talk about is Mary Kay Ash. Here's her quote. "Aerodynamically, the bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly, but the bumblebee doesn't know it, so it goes on flying anyway." Of course, we know that Mary Kay Ash is the founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics. And Jim, you had the opportunity to speak in front of 10,000 women at a Mary Kay convention in Dallas, Texas. Tell us about that experience.
Well, I did, and I got to meet Mary Kay Ash, who was an amazing lady. And at the time, and it still may be true for all I know, there were more women who earned over $50,000 a year in her organization than any other organization in the world. And she took a great deal of pride in that. And I remember sitting backstage with her, and she said, we have about 10,000 women here, and you're the only man in the building. And I said, I'm okay with that. I think God made man first, got all the bugs worked out, and then he made women. Women are better. I mean, it's just my opinion. But she was amazing. And, one of the things I learned from her sitting backstage is they were getting ready to have a private session after the arena event with all of their leaders to get their thoughts on product line. And she said it takes a lot of extra time to get everybody's input, and we don't take a lot of the input, but we get it. And I said, why do you do it then? And she said, Jim, people support what they help to create. And even though we may not take their suggestions, knowing that their voice was heard makes a big difference to people. And I thought, what a powerful, powerful statement. And, she was one of those people that was just everything you would hope she would be.
Man, that's strong, Jim. Powerful. I was in traffic over the last few days, and I looked up, and I was behind a silver car, and it said Mary Kay Cosmetics on it. And I always thought that Mary Kay's cars were pink, and they were at one time because I Googled it, and it being what's called the Mary Kay Career Car, I found out that there are currently over 3,600 of these cars on the road nationwide, and 1,000 of them are pink Cadillacs. So maybe one day I'll spot one of those Cadillacs. All right, Jim, the final legendary voice of a lady of history is someone that I chose because it reminds me of our first interview together, you and I, many, many years ago here on Oasis Radio Network. Again, I'm David Warren. If you just tuned in, talking with Jim Stovall. And this lady's name is Katharine Hepburn. And her quote is this: "Life is hard. After all, it kills you." Katharine Hepburn is the actress with the most Oscar wins. She is tied with Laurence Olivier, 4 wins each of the Oscar statuette. And I wanted to ask about this legendary female voice of history because of your personal connection with her, Jim. So just like you did back in our first interview, will you retell how you met this fascinating lady?
Well, when I started the Narrative Television Network, and we make movies and television accessible for 13 million blind people around the world, and we ran these movies with these extra soundtracks inserted in between the dialogue, so people can hear what they can't see. And we were just about to go on the air, and then we had a guy that, he was kind of one of these problem finders. He was not a problem solver. He would just find them and make sure everybody knew how miserable we ought to be. And I had to release him shortly after that to go find an opportunity somewhere else. But he comes into my office and said, Jim, we're not going to make it. We're not going to succeed. I mean, we may as well close the doors now and shut the company down. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, in 8 weeks, you're going to launch on national television on over 1,000 stations in North America to deliver 2-hour blocks of programming via satellite at various times of the day and night, and our movies are too short. And I said, what do you mean our movies? We own some of the greatest movies ever made. What are you talking about? And he said, you're going to average about 20 minutes short per movie, and you're going to have close to a half hour of dead air on national television. And what are you going to do about it? Well, I couldn't imagine, so I thought, and I said, the first thing came to my mind, I said, I'm going to host a talk show, and I'm going to interview these people that are in these movies and then fill up that time. And so my colleague at the time, Kathy Harper, and I, we went to the library, and she's legally blind. I'm totally blind, and we were the blind leading the blind, and she had a big magnifying glass, and we found a book called Addresses of the Stars. And I wrote a letter, kids, an actual paper letter, snail mail, and sent it out to hundreds of stars that are in these various movies and told them what a great career opportunity I was going to give them for no money to come on my non-existent talk show on my mythical network, and could they please hurry up and let me know, because we're launching in a few weeks. And we had a moment of silence and sent out all those letters, and it was just a few days later, a call comes in on the phone, and they buzzed me, and they said, Katharine Hepburn's on the phone. And I'm thinking, my Lord, I'm just this guy from Oklahoma, and I'd never done local or regional TV, and when I pick up the phone, I think I'm going to talk to her secretary or her agent or something, and she answers the phone in that legendary Hepburn voice, and I was so taken back. The only thing I could think of to say, I said, Miss Hepburn, I'm surprised you answer your own phone. And she said, Jim, I've always felt when one's phone rings, one should answer it. Don't you answer your phone? I said, yes, ma'am, I do, and I wish I hadn't brought that up. But long story short, she made the arrangements. We flew to New York, and she was my first big interview. And then we formed an acquaintance or a friendship that lasted till the end of her life. And I remember our last conversation. I said, Miss Hepburn, you helped me build my network. I used you to build that network, because after I had you on, I could tell Frank Sinatra and Jimmy Stewart and Michael Douglas and all these amazing people that, we had Katharine Hepburn on earlier in the month, and we'd like to follow up with you. And all of a sudden, it was the cool thing to do. And I said, I used you to build my network. And she said, Jim, men have been using me all my life. At least you're honest about it. And she was a marvelous, marvelous lady. And I will never forget, she was not perfect. She was an amazing, gifted actress. But I will tell you, at a critical point in time, when she had the opportunity to help millions of blind people that need help, she did what she could do, and it made all the difference in the world.
That's great. You just mentioned some big names of Hollywood. Did they say yes to your request?
Yes, I got Mr. Sinatra. The second week, I got Jimmy Stewart. I flew out to Hollywood, one of the scariest moments of my life, and Michael Douglas was fabulous.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many years have you been at this now, Jim?
This is our 33rd year doing narrative television.
Well, congratulations. And also on the new book, Words That Shaped Our World, which we're discussing today. This book by Jim Stovall and his co-author, Kathy Johnson, is available wherever books are sold. And you can check out more about today's guest, Jim Stovall, on his website, jimstovall.com. JimStovall.com. All right, after our final break, I'm going to ask Jim to choose a legendary voice that I have not yet asked about. Plus, I want to loop back to Mr. Dale Carnegie. Back for the wrap-up after this. I'm David Warren, Program Director at Oasis Radio Network and one of the hosts of this podcast. All of our hosts enjoy hearing from you, our listening family, so drop us a note. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and you'll receive new episodes on your mobile devices. And now, back to the show. I'm David Warren, and I have been your happy host today. Very happy, actually, because Jim Stovall has graced our airwaves once again here on Oasis Radio Network. And I consider Jim, and I know my whole family does, our whole staff considers you a friend of this network. And we've been around, we're now in our 36th year. And Jim, you have been such an integral part of especially this program, The Road Show. And I guess you're kind of our Jimmy Stewart in a way. When people like Jim Stovall say yes as coming on as a guest, it's interesting what doors it opens up because our listenership expands and it just creates a whole nother level for us. So thank you. Thank you for giving of your time. We don't pay you to do this. You get paid mega bucks to go speak at arena events, but you do this for free. So I want you to know how much our listeners, my family, our staff, and I appreciate and value your time, Jim.
Well, and I appreciate the relationship we've had. When I first started out with you guys, there weren't a lot of people paying me anything or standing in line to have me on their show. So, and I meant what I said. I always enjoy our conversations. And then I hear from your listeners, and you have the most marvelous listeners around the country, and it's a privilege, my friend.
Thank you. I believe that. Our listeners are wonderful. They're very dedicated to this radio ministry. Okay. Which legendary voice was the first to make it on your list and into the book, Words That Shaped Our World?
Probably Socrates, who said, the unexamined life is not worth living, because that is the whole essence of our spiritual, mental success life. I mean, that's the beginning of, not just who we are, but who we ought to be. The thing we examine is the thing we change, and the thing we measure is the thing that moves. And it all begins with, wow, I need to sit down and take an honest look at myself. And it's what I call Stovall's 11th commandment. Not that we don't have plenty to do just keeping the first 10, but I thought I would add one. And Stovall's 11th commandment says, thou shalt not kid thyself. I mean, or as Mr. Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. If you'll lie to yourself, you'll lie to me, you'll lie to the whole world. And it's the most difficult person to be honest with is that person in the mirror. And from time to time, we need to go through a process I call deconstruction. And you look at everything in your life that you're doing and you ask why. Mm-hmm. Why do I live here? Why do I live with this person? Why am I in this relationship, this friendship? Why do I work here? Why do I do all these things? And you need to come up with a good answer other than, well, it's what I've already done. And then you look at all the things in your life you've thought about that you haven't done, and you ask, why not? Why have I not done that? Why did I not do this? Why did I not do this? Because if we're not careful, we just get so caught up in inertia, and we keep doing what we've been doing. And folks, you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you always got. And if you're happy with that, the process of deconstruction will be like going to the doctor, getting a checkup, and he said, everything looks great. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a wonderful day. I mean, everything's good. But deconstruction often uncovers things and says, why am I doing this, and why don't I do that? And so when you think of that, and Socrates saying the unexamined life is not worth living, we worry about what everybody else thinks of us. In reality, the only opinion is the one that we have of ourselves. I'm a firm believer that other people's opinion of me is none of my business.
Well said. Jim, out of all of the legendary voices that we've discussed on today's roadshow and which are included in your new book, a person who still tops the charts in book sales is Mr. Dale Carnegie. And here is his quote. There are always 3 speeches for every one you actually gave. The one you practiced, the one you gave, and the one you wish you gave. I can identify with that, by the way, Jim. Who was Dale Carnegie?
Dale Carnegie was a master at communication and relationships. And, if you're moving to a desert island and they're never going to have books there again, there's about 10 books you ought to take. And one of them is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It is such an amazing experience. And, there are people, franchisees that do courses now, Dale Carnegie courses. And, I would recommend everyone at least look into what they do there and how it can benefit you, because truly, truly transformational. It's one thing to understand a principle, but it's another thing to make it so other people can. I believe, David, if we learn something, we change our life. If we teach someone, we change their life. But if we teach people to teach, we change the world. And that's what Dale Carnegie did. He taught a lot of people how to teach his philosophy. And it continues to go on today. And 100 years from now, I don't know what will be going on in the world, but I do know there will be people teaching the Dale Carnegie course. And it has been the basis of many, many people's success around the world.
Jim, you and I both enjoy listening to books. I don't know if you use Audible, but that's something that I subscribe to, and I listen to a lot of books on Audible.com, and I find it interesting that Dale Carnegie's bestseller from 1936, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it still is sitting in the top 25 over on Audible. Wow. Okay, Jim, I want to read just a little bit about Dale Carnegie from your book before we say goodbye. You write in the book, as a professional speaker, I have spoken to well over 1 million people in arenas, convention centers, and corporate events. Speaking in public is among the greatest fears of most people. I believe that sincerity and spontaneity are the keys to a great speech. The closer you come to speaking as if you're passing a friend on the street or talking to a neighbor over the fence, the better your speech will be and the more of your message will be received. Jim, you say success in most areas of life, including public speaking, comes when we remember it's not about us. It's about our audience and how we impact their lives. It's much better to have our audience be able to relate to our message and internalize it in their lives than to impress them with our oratory. Remembering that we can never give a perfect speech, or roadshow, by the way, allows us to do our best and relax in the certain knowledge that our best effort is good enough. Jim, I have read a lot of great quotes today, but I want to close with one by you. You say, the fastest way to success in any endeavor of life is to compile and study the wisdom of people who have been where you want to go. This collective wisdom is stored between quotation marks. Well said, my friend, and congratulations once again on the new book. Tell us where people can get it.
You can get it at Amazon or any bookstore, anywhere books are sold, and and if you want to know about other projects of mine, keep listening to the Road Show, and I will be back here talking to my friend David Warren about the next project.
And that would include Words That Shaped Our World, I guess, part 2, or however you're going to title it.
Yeah, I think it may be like More Words That Shape Our World, or I don't know. I don't know what we'll do with that. But it's always a privilege, my friend, truly. I mean, we've been doing this for more years than either of us would probably like to admit. And, it's still fun. It's still great. And, I'm excited. I'm still out there doing stuff, and I'm excited you're still there that I can tell it to.
Thank you. It is still fun, Jim. I agree with you on that. And one of the things that I love about you and our listeners love about you is your accessibility. And if you have something important to share with Jim, maybe how one of his books or movies has impacted your life in a special or meaningful way, you can call Jim. His office number is 918-627-1000, 918-627-1000. And he's very quick to respond to email. I know this as a fact. Jim@jimstovall.com. Jim@jimstovall.com. That's also his website, JIMSTOVALL.com. As we close today, Jim, any final thoughts, words, or quotes?
Well, I do want to encourage your people to feel free to call or email me. I have 10 million books in print around the world in 36 languages, and every one of them has my phone number and email address. So, I would encourage people to call even if you just want to see if you can get through. I had a lady call me from Auckland, New Zealand not long ago, and I said, "What can I do for you?" She said, "Nothing. I just want to see if you'd really answer." And I will tell your listeners what I told her. I want you to know the hardest it ever feels, the farthest it ever seems, and the darkest it ever appears. I want you to know you got one guy believes in you and believes in your dreams. And if you don't think so, you just call or email me, and we will talk it through. And Dave, I've written over 1,000 of my syndicated columns, and the quote I always leave people with at the end of every one of those is, it doesn't matter what you know, it doesn't matter what you think, it matters what you do, and today's the day. Today's the day.
That's right.
I mean, if you have an idea, a project, a thought, something you want to do, a calling in your life, that means you're supposed to do something today. Today's the day.
Is the day. Amen. Well, for Jim Stovall, I'm David Warren, and it's been another great Road Show. You've been listening to The Road Show. If you'd like to write to us, here's our address. The Road Show, P.O. Box 1924, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74101. Our email address is roadshow@oasisnetwork.org. The views of today's guest aren't necessarily those of this station, but we do appreciate and thank our guest for spending this time with us. The Road Show, an Oasis Network presentation.